All right, today we're jumping into a huge case from the Supreme Court of Canada, one that totally reshaped what it means to have the right to remain silent.
We've all heard that line, right? You have the right to remain silent. It sounds so final, so absolute. But this case, R v. Hebert, really digs into a fascinating question. What happens when the police find a clever way to get around your choice to stay quiet?
So here's the quick play-by-play. It all starts with a pretty brazen robbery. A few months go by, and police arrest their guy, Neil Hebert. Now, Hebert does exactly what you're supposed to do. He gets his lawyer on the phone, and then he tells the police, straight up, I'm not making a statement. But here's the twist. The police decide to put an undercover cop in the cell with him, and Hebert, thinking he's just chatting with another guy who's been arrested, starts to talk. And that one conversation sets the stage for a massive legal battle.
Okay, so let's rewind and break this down, starting right from the top with the crime itself and the moment Hebert is arrested. This is really where the legal clock on his rights officially starts ticking.
You know, this right here is such a critical moment. There is no gray area. It's not like he was confused or unsure. Hebert gets professional legal advice, he knows his rights, and he makes a very clear choice. He has formally, officially invoked his right to silence. So now the ball is in the police's court.
So what do you do when your main suspect shuts the door on you? Well, in this situation, the police decided to get creative. And this is where their strategy and the whole controversy really kicks into high gear.
I think this is the perfect way to describe what happened. You know, the official front door method, the police interview room, was slammed shut. So the police decided, okay, we'll find another way in, a way that Hebert would never see coming.
And the official court documents lay it all out, plain as day. The guy in the cell with Hebert wasn't just some random dude. He was a police corporal, in disguise, put there for one reason, to get Hebert to talk. Corporal Miller's specific job was to, quote, engage the accused in conversation. And that's precisely what he did.
And just like that, this one clever police tactic ends up creating this huge clash between two really powerful ideas. This wasn't just about whether one confession was valid. It was about the fundamental rules of the game for our entire justice system.
So here's the essential tug-of-war the Supreme Court had to figure out. On one side, you've got the police, who have a totally legitimate job to do. They need to solve crimes. But on the other side, you've got the individual's rights, which are protected by the Charter. The big question became, can the state use a trick to get around a right that a person has already explicitly used?
Well, this question went all the way to the top. The Supreme Court of Canada had to step in, weigh these two competing values, and basically draw a new line in the sand for how the right to silence would be protected from now on. And this right here, this is the absolute heart of the whole decision. The court said, look, the right to silence isn't just about the police not being allowed to force a confession out of you. It's something deeper. It's about your positive right to freely choose. It's your decision to make, and the state can't trick you out of that choice. You can really follow the court's logic step by step here. First, Hebert clearly made a choice. Second, the police used a trick to basically cancel out that choice. Third, and this is key, the officer wasn't a passive observer. He wasn't just a fly on the wall. He actively engaged Hebert in conversation. So what the police were doing was getting around the rules to do something indirectly that they were forbidden from doing directly. The confession was a direct result of violating Hebert's freedom to choose. And boom, there it is. If you want one line that sums up the entire philosophy of this ruling, this is it. It comes from Justice McLaughlin, who wrote the decision. It's a powerful statement about the balance of power. The state, with all its resources, cannot just decide to override your choice.
Okay, so what's the practical impact of all this? Did the Supreme Court just make it impossible for police to use undercover agents in jail cells? Let's dig into the details of what this ruling actually means on the ground.
It's a really common question, and maybe a surprising answer, but no, they're not all banned. The court knew this was a big deal, so they were actually very careful to draw some really clear lines. They didn't just issue a blanket ban, they created a framework. So here are the 4 crucial limits. First, this right only kicks in once you're detained. Second, the police can still try to question you and persuade you to change your mind, as long as it's not coercive. Third, if you decide to spill your guts to a real cellmate who then becomes an informant, well, that's fair game. The Charter protects you from the state, not other people. And finally, and this is the most important one, it all comes down to what the undercover officer actually does. That last point is really the whole ballgame. The court drew a massive distinction here. If an undercover cop is just sitting in a cell, and the suspect, all on his own, decides to start bragging about a crime he committed, that evidence is probably okay. But if that officer actively starts a conversation, asking probing questions to draw out a confession from someone who has already said they want to be silent, that is eliciting. And that's what crosses the line.
So what happened to Neil Hebert in the end? Well, that confession was pretty much the only real evidence the prosecution had. And since the court found that it was obtained by violating his charter rights, that evidence got thrown out. With no confession, there was no case, and Hebert was acquitted.
And that really leaves us with the big, lingering question at the end of all this. The Hebert case is more than just a story about one robbery. It's about a constant balancing act. It draws a really important line in the sand, protecting an individual's right to choose against the power of the state. And it forces us, as a society, to keep asking, where exactly is that perfect balance? That's a question we have to keep trying to answer.